And verse number? Verse number?
58.
58. اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم وَلَمَّا ضُرِبَ ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ مَثَلًا إِذَا قَوْمُكَ مِنْهُ يَصِدُّونَ. That was the verse? The translation is, and when the son of Mary is mentioned as an example, lo, thy people raise a clamor thereat.
Also, the promised Messiah alayhi salam has come in the likeness of Hazrat Isa ibn Maryam. So, can we infer from this verse?
He said that the promised Messiah, he came, or like the Hadith Isa ibn Maryam. Can we infer any resemblance?
Well, this is applicable to that as well. You see, what happened was that the Arabian people who were idolaters took exception to the mention of Jesus, while it was mentioned only as a simile. They said, they thought he was an imaginary god of Christians. And they inferred from this that he is against our idols, but he is not against the idols of Christians. This is the point which has to be specifically observed. You follow this point? You see, when Hazrat sallallahu alayhi wa sallam strongly opposed idolatry and proved that idol worship is wrong, imaginary gods, not only idols, imaginary gods are false. At the same time, when the Holy Quran mentioned Jesus Christ, the Arabs were quick enough to notice this, and they thought that his treatment is not just and even. He indulges in rejection of our idols, whether they are idols or heroes, Arab heroes, who are raised to the status of gods. He rejects them and condemns them totally. But when it comes to Jesus Christ, he mentions him in the Holy Quran, which means that he accepts their idol, their so-called God, but does not accept our gods. You understand? Now you follow this point? Now the Holy Quran says that Jesus is mentioned in the Holy Quran as a muscle. This means that Jesus is mentioned in the Holy Quran just before these verses, to be a muscle, to appear in future. So when this is mentioned in the Holy Quran that Jesus would appear in the future, it is this point which helps them draw the conclusion. You see, in all the mention of Jesus Christ in the Quran, his sonship is denied and rejected. So the Arab idolaters could not take exception to that. But just a few verses before this, Jesus is mentioned as Masalan, from which they inferred that Jesus would reappear, and he could only reappear if he were alive. So they inferred that the Prophet, the Holy Prophet, was supporting the beliefs of Christians, that in fact he was a god and he was still alive and he would reappear. This is a message which they received from these verses. And within a short interval, the Holy Quran rejects their conclusion. Now, if you start reading it from the beginning, then I'll be able to connect these things. Let Imam Sahib read the verses again.
This verse and the few following.
Few before them.
I see. اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم وَنَادَى فِرْعَوْنُ فِي قَوْمِهِ
After this.
فَاسْتَخَفَّ قَوْمَهُ فَأَطَاعُوهُ.
After this.
Then this is the verse.
Achha, then the verse following.
Yes, following.
All right.
Yes.
Read this throughout.
Yes. وَلَمَّا ضُرِبَ ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ مَثَلًا إِذَا قَوْمُكَ مِنْهُ يَصِدُّونَ وَقَالُوا أَآلِهَتُنَا خَيْرٌ أَمْ هُوَ مَا ضَرَبُوهُ لَكَ إِلَّا جَدَلًا بَلْ هُمْ قَوْمٌ خَصِمُونَ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا عَبْدٌ أَنْعَمْنَا عَلَيْهِ وَجَعَلْنَاهُ مَثَلًا لِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ وَلَوْ نَشَاءُ لَجَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ مَلَائِكَةً فِي الْأَرْضِ يَخْلُفُونَ وَإِنَّهُ لَعِلْمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ فَلَا تَمْتَرُنَّ بِهَا وَاتَّبِعُونِ هَذَا صِرَاطٌ مُسْتَقِيمٌ وَلَا يَصُدَّنَّكُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ.
This ilm al-lisaa, which is the central point. Now read again and I'll explain the whole verse.
وَلَمَّا ضُرِبَ ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ مَثَلًا إِذَا قَوْمُكَ مِنْهُ يَصِدُّونَ.
When Jesus Christ is mentioned as a masal, not as a real person, this is the point. When Jesus Christ is mentioned as a masal, إِذَا قَوْمُكَ
مِنْهُ يَصِدُّونَ,
they make noises and run away from this. They don't like this. While Jesus Christ is mentioned as God or Son of God, he is only mentioned as masal, which means an uswa. The masal in Arabic also means uswa. So when Jesus is mentioned as uswa for Bani Israel, they misconstrue and they think that their God, the so-called God, is accepted by the Quran or by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. While the Holy Prophet or the Holy Quran never mentioned him by way of what they believe him to be. The Holy Quran and the Holy Prophet mentioned Jesus Christ only as uswa, like Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was also an uswa for Bani Israel. You understand? So when they misconstrue the word, like it is their habit, and the Holy Quran has mentioned many such occasions, they object against this and they say, you do not accept our gods while you accept their God. Masalan can also mean, for example. So instead of uswa, that is a model, they translate the word masalan, for example, as for example. So they say, for example, you mention their so-called God and you reject our gods. This is not what the Holy Quran had said. Immediately after this, the Holy Quran says, the Holy Quran presents Jesus as a masalan who is not son of God, but Abdullah, as a creature of God. So when they understand the word creature, as it is mentioned, then the objection is automatically removed. Now you reread the verses and you begin to understand the meaning. Please.
وَلَمَّا ضُرِبَ ابْنُ مَرْيَمَ مَثَلًا
Masalan in the sense of uswa.
إِذَا قَوْمُكَ مِنْهُ يَصِدُّونَ وَقَالُوا أَآلِهَتُنَا خَيْرٌ أَمْ هُوَ مَا ضَرَبُوهُ لَكَ إِلَّا جَدَلًا بَلْ هُمْ قَوْمٌ خَصِمُونَ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا عَبْدٌ أَنْعَمْنَا عَلَيْهِ وَجَعَلْنَاهُ مَثَلًا لِبَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ.
Masalan in this sense. Masalan, as a creature of God who has nothing to do with the so-called sonship. And all creatures of God who are chosen by Allah as prophets, they are masalan. They are uswa for their people. And only in this capacity Jesus is mentioned, that he is a model for his people, like Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a model for the whole world. Like previous prophets were models for their people. So the Holy Quran says he is mentioned not as a son of God, he is mentioned as this. Why do you misconstrue? After this, the Holy Quran goes on to build the same theme with relation to the future. Exactly in this position, Jesus would appear in future and deliver the message of Allah before the asa, before the revolution takes place. This part is the one which refers to the advent of Ahmediyya. Understand? Let him translate all this and then I'll return to this and pick it up from here. Read the remaining verse.
Yeah. After that, the A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. وَلَوْ نَشَاءُ لَجَعَلْنَا مِنْكُمْ مَلَائِكَةً فِي الْأَرْضِ يَخْلُفُونَ وَإِنَّهُ لَعِلْمٌ لِلسَّاعَةِ فَلَا تَمْتَرُنَّ بِهَا وَاتَّبِعُونِ هَذَا صِرَاطٌ مُسْتَقِيمٌ.
Repeat the translation.
Yes. The translation of these two verses is, and if we so willed, we could make from among you angels to be your successors in the earth. But verily he was a sign of the hour. So entertain no doubt about it, but follow me.
This is here mistranslated. It is not was, will be. You change was to will be, and the whole problem is resolved. Can you hear?
But verily he will be a sign of the hour. So entertain no doubt about it, but follow me.
That means that he would reappear on earth before the time of great revolution. Asa reminds you of another word, asa, used in the Holy Quran, which is with relation to Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. So that sa indicates a great spiritual revolution introduced and brought about by the advent of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now Hazrat Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has repeatedly mentioned that Jesus would appear before Asa, and soon after his appearance, Sa would take place. The non-Ahmadi scholars completely fail to understand the true meaning of this because they do not relate it to the first Sa. They think Sa means doomsday. While here, the Sa must be related to the advent of Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the first place. And however you translate there, it should also be translated in the same way in the case of Jesus Christ. When you do it, the problem is resolved. Why did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prophesy the advent of Jesus? It is these verses which authorize him to do so according to the will of God. He must have interpreted this verse in the way I am interpreting. Otherwise, where is the source in the Quran which predicts the advent of Jesus? Nowhere else. And all the who do not agree with us in so many things agree with us here, that it is the re-advent of Jesus which is mentioned. See? There is total agreement, except for the fact that they misinterpret the word "sa" and believe that as Jesus comes, within a short time after his coming, the doomsday would take place and the whole world would be destroyed. This interpretation is contradicted by so many traditions of Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which are very clear about the fact that when Jesus appears, Sa would not take place in the sense of doomsday. The world would continue to live, and the Sa would appear. It is very clearly mentioned by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Do the ulama want the world to believe that within a period of 40 years, Jesus would create the worst people on earth, and then the doomsday would appear? It is so absurd. It's impossible to happen like this. What is the purpose of coming of Jesus? To fill the world with evil and denial of God with such totality that not a single person is left, but he is the worst of humans. So these ulama do not understand these things because they do not relate the right words with the similar words used in the Quran. As-sa, as related to, as mentioned in case of Sallallahu Alaihi advent, is the same word which is repeated in the case of the advent of Jesus. After Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, 2000 years have passed, and yet that doomsday has not taken place. But the Sa did take place. These blind people do not observe that. A great revolution was brought about by Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which filled not only Arabia, but beyond Arabia, a large part of the world. Yet that work remained unfinished until it was so destined that the advent of Jesus Christ would restart the process of spiritual revolution. You understand this point? This is what is mentioned here. وَإِنَّهُ عِلْمُ الرِّسَّاءِ لَا عِلْمُ الرِّسَّاءِ. Jesus is also a sign for the approach of Sa. So when he appears in future, he would usher in a new era of the spread of Islam. That is the Sa. Right? Please.